everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and we are back with another breakdown, more Easter eggs, this time for Wish World, and there is a lot of stuff for us to cover this week. Before I start though, do make sure, if you haven't already, that you've hit the subscribe button. The big finale is coming in just a few days' time, so make sure that you also have the notification bell hit as well, so you don't miss the videos when they do get posted too. Number 34. So the cold open sees the Rani arrive in Bavaria 1865, where she does a bit of baby napping. And though we don't learn his name until later, this baby is Desidarium, the god of wishes, and member of the pantheon alongside Sutek, the toy maker, Lux, and others. Now the word Desidarium means an ardent desire or longing, so you can certainly see why that name was chosen for a god that can turn people's wishes and desires into reality. Furthermore, the idea of the seventh son of a seventh son possessing great power is a concept from folklore related to the fact that the number 7 has a long history of mystical and biblical significance. Think about the 7 sins, the 7 virtues, the 7 wonders of the world, etc. Interestingly, there's even historical record of seventh sons being called Doctor due to their supposed powers as healers, which is very interesting indeed. Now also in this scene, the Rani suggests that the baby needs a strong name like Sturm und Drang, and this translates to storm and stress, but more generally means turmoil. Also, I apologise for my awful German pronunciation there. Number 33. So just before the opening title sequence, we're introduced to not the Doctor, but John Smith. John Smith has been the Doctor's go-to alias for decades and was first used in the second Doctor story, The Wheel in Space, when companion Jamie gave it as his name while the Doctor was knocked unconscious. It was used quite regularly by the third Doctor during his exile on Earth and was most famously adopted by the 10th Doctor in Human Nature and the Family of Blood when he hid his true identity inside a fob watch and posed as the human schoolteacher, John Smith. Number 32 and number 31. So just after the opening title sequence, we see Conrad reading from a book called Doctor Who and the Deadly Wish. And there are a few details to discuss here. Firstly, and I'm sure many of you picked up on this right away, the design of the book is a clear riff on the iconic original UK edition of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which was released in 1997. In addition, there are more of these books on a desk in the room with Conrad, with titles like Doctor Who and the Big Bad Wolf, Doctor Who and the Pandorica, Doctor Who and the Last Time War, Doctor Who and the Runaway Bride, Doctor Who and the English Rose, and Doctor Who and the Timeless Children. Now these books were apparently authored by I.M. Foreman, which is a very special link with Doctor Who history because I.M. Foreman owned the junkyard on Totter's Lane where the first Doctor and Susan were hiding in the very first Doctor Who story, An Unearthly Child. Number 30. The Doctor, John Smith, arrives for work at the Unified National Insurance Team, which reworks the UNIT acronym into something suitable for the Wish World, which was very nicely done, I must say. Now, the standard UNIT tower set has been transformed here into this old-fashioned and very dull-looking office space. And while the whole set is full of great touches, one of the best is very difficult to spot. So on Kate's desk at the front of the room is a framed photo of her father, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, one of the founding members of UNIT. That's the actual unit, by the way, not this weird insurance company rip-off version. Anyway, this picture of the Brigadier is a publicity still from the 1971 third Doctor serial The Mind of Evil, which featured the Master and revolved around a mind control device. No prizes for guessing how that relates to Wish World. Number 29. Now, while we sadly don't have Flood Watch this week, we do have the grand return of Twist Watch, Twist Watch, Twist Watch! Wish World sees the return of Susan Twist as Susan Triad, the former Angel of Death turned unit operative who is apparently really bad at making tea. So it is quite funny then that she's a tea lady in this alternate world. Now what's extra special about her appearance here is that she's wearing the exact same costume that she wore in the season 1 episode The Devil's Cord, where she was one of Sutek's Angels of Death in the 60s and was masked as a tea lady at Abbey Road Studios. Number 28 and number 27. So the Rani returns from her shopping trip to get Conrad some sandwich meat, and we get our first look inside the Bone Palace. Now on the left, as the Rani enters the main room, is the Seal of Rascalon, which she later uses to try and jog the Doctor's memory. Rascalon was one of the founders of Time Lord Society and has also served as the Lord President of Gallifrey. And his last full appearance was in the series 9 episode Hellbent, where he was stripped of his presidency by the Doctor. So if the two characters ever do meet again, things will quite possibly get quite heated. And speaking of Gallifreyan seals, the seal of Omega can be glimpsed in a literal blink and you'll miss it shot when Conrad speaks his name during the episode's big cliffhanger. Now, Omega has been seen wearing his seal in the classic series, and it's also visible in the next time trailer for the Reality War as well, so we'll have to wait and see exactly how it's relevant next week. Number 26. And sticking with the Rani, there's a neat little detail in her costuming that harks back to the original Kate O'Mara incarnation. Now, in certain shots you can see that the Archie Punjabi Rani wears these large gold bangles / bracelets on her wrist, which is almost certainly a callback to the first Rani, who wore a similar item on her wrist in the classic series. Number 25. So the two Ranis head out onto the balcony for a bit of scheming, and we are introduced to the best sonic screwdriver in the show. Yep, I said it. The Rani Sonic is the best. Now, one of the reasons it's so good is the amount of thought that went into the concept and the design. Now, according to prop art director Michael Van Kesteren, it was inspired by old medical equipment to link back to the Rani being a scientist, with its white enamel syringe-like design. And even better, the red grip was added as a nod to the Rani played by Kate O'Mara in the 80s, with the design team lifting the pattern from O'Mara's Rani costume in Time and the Rani and incorporating it into the new Rani Sonic. Meanwhile, the purple tip was inspired by Deadly Nightshade, a toxic plant which Van Kesteren described as, quote, beautiful and deadly. And you can certainly see how that fits with the Rani. Full marks for this design. No notes, it's perfect, I love it. Number 24. So folks, after Sean's cameo in the Doctor Who Unleashed episode for Space Babies, and my cameo in Lucky Day, we get another WhoTuber cameo during this conversation scene between Ruby and Shirley. Visible in the background in a few shots is Ferris, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with from his Doctor Who videos here on YouTube. You know what is really cool to see stuff like this, and there is actually a video over on his channel if you want the full story of how this cameo came to be and about his adventures on the set. Number 23. So the Doctor is sitting at the table watching some absolutely shocking television, and who should appear on the TV screen? But Rogue. Played by Jonathan Groff, Rogue first appeared in the season 1 episode of the same name and initially believed the Doctor to be the shape-shifting enemy he was tasked with hunting. Now, the episode concluded with Rogue sacrificing himself by falling into some unknown dimension, but not before asking the Doctor to find me, which of course the Doctor never bothered to do. Just ask Susan. She's been waiting for him to come back for bloody ages. He does not come back. Now, this cameo was actually filmed not long after the production of Rogue, so it's been in the planning for quite some time. Number 22. Ruby, Shirley and Winnie are outside the Bone Palace trying to block Conrad's signal, and Ruby has 2 flashbacks to her time with Conrad in Lucky Day. Now, while the first of these flashes appeared in the episode, the second one of them walking through a park actually didn't. So this is presumably a deleted scene from Lucky Day, and based on their costumes, plus the fact that Ruby is handing Conrad the Shriek antidote, it likely takes place after the podcast recording, while they're on their way to the coffee shop in the scene that we do see. Number 21 to number 19. So the Rani is trying to instill the Doctor with doubt, and so she takes him for a waltz and tells him her backstory. Now, first of all, Russell T Davies loves a villainous musical number. Think about the Saxon Master in The Sound of Drums, and The Last of the Time Lords, the Toymaker in The Giggle, and now this. Now, this scene also contains a few welcome flashbacks to the original Rani, played by the marvellous Kate O'Mara. The first of these is from the 1993 charity EastEnders crossover Dimensions in Time, which puts any lingering doubt to bed. Dimensions in Time is canon. Now, the second clip is from the Rani's debut story, 1985's The Mark of the Rani, while the third is from 1987's Time and the Rani, during the opening scene where the 6th Doctor regenerates into the 7th. Or more accurately, where Sylvester McCoy in a blonde wig regenerated into Sylvester McCoy without a blonde wig. Number 18. So the Rani has used the Doctor's doubt to shatter reality and break the Earth apart, and we see buildings and cars falling in all kinds of crazy directions as Ruby, Shirley and Winnie watch on. Now on the side of one of these buildings is the name Jestetta, and if that rings a bell, that's because Jestetta is also the name of the mining company in the season 2 episode The Well. So it's not unreasonable that an early version of the company existed on contemporary Earth and survived all the way through to the year 500,000 on the planet Midnight. I mean, after all, Magpie Electricals from the Idiot's Lantern ended up in all sorts of crazy places, including Starship UK in the 33rd century. Stranger things have happened. Number 17, Omega returns. Omega is one of the very first Time Lords and was responsible for gifting the Time Lords the ability to travel in time. He was then lost and forgotten in an antimatter dimension and grew angry and vengeful towards the Time Lords during this time. Now, his brief voice lines that we can hear in Wishworld have actually been taken from the big Finnish audio drama Gallifrey Intervention Earth, which was released in 2015. And this does make me slightly concerned that they don't actually have an Omega actor lined up for the reality war, and he's just going to be some huge CGI monster in a similar vein to Sutekh, although Sutekh did have a voice. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Now, for a full, proper deep dive into Omega and some theories about what might be next, make sure that you check out our Ending Explained video that we dropped a few days ago that goes all through Omega and what he's about. Number 16 to number 1. Another week, another whole load of Doctor cameos. So as with the story in the engine, Wishworld plays us a clip show of every past Doctor, starting with a shot of William Hartnell's first Doctor from the 1966 serial The Massacre. Well, technically this isn't the first Doctor. This was Hartnell playing a second role in that serial. In this case, the Abbot of Amboise, who was a physical double of the first Doctor. And it actually gets a bit weirder because there's actually no surviving footage of the massacre available to use. This particular shot was included at the end of 2023's The Daleks in Colour as a teaser for future colorizations. So it was made solely for that purpose. It does make you wonder why, out of all the first Doctor footage they could have gone with, they used a shot that isn't of the first Doctor, and is also from a fully missing serial. Anyway, the next shot is of Patrick Troughton's second Doctor from the early 1970s serial The Three Doctors, which is a very fitting reference as this was also the first appearance of the mighty Omega. John Pertwee's third Doctor is up next, looking very heaven-scenty, I might add, and this shot is taken from the 1972 serial Day of the Daleks, and it's been graded much differently for its cameo here, presumably to make it look more cinematic and fit in with the rest of the episode and these other shots just a little bit better. Now this is followed by Tom Baker as the fourth Doctor from the closing moments of the 1978 serial The Invasion of Time. It's also one of Doctor Who's earliest fourth wall breaks, with the fourth Doctor grinning right down the camera after getting a new version of K9, K9 Mark II. Now, after a brief cut back to the 15th Doctor in Wishworld, we then see Peter Davison as the 5th Doctor in the 1983 crossover story The Five Doctors, during the scene where he's been brainwashed by fellow Time Lord Barusa. We then jump to Colin Baker's 6th Doctor in the 1985 serial Vengeance on Varos, and then to Sylvester McCoy's 7th Doctor in the 1989 story The Curse of Fenric. Up next is the 8th Doctor, and it would seem that the BBC is either reluctant to use or can't use footage from Paul McGann's main TV story, the 1996 TV movie. Now, in the story in the engine, his clip was taken from the 2013 minisode The Night of the Doctor, while his clip here is from the Guardians of the Edge sequence in Jodie Whittaker's final story, The Power of the Doctor. Now, next we see John Hurt as the War Doctor in the 50th anniversary special The Day of the Doctor. And his placement here indicates that these flashes are in timeline order and not in the order they first appeared in the show. Although Joe Martin's clip cameo later in the scene would appear to disagree with that, so confusion. We then jump to the 2005 revival properly, with a shot of the 9th Doctor from the end of his very first episode Rose, during the scene where he tries to convince Rose to travel with him. The 10th Doctor follows on in a shot from the 2008 episode Forest of the Dead, and this again is from right at the end of the episode during the scene where he opens the TARDIS by snapping his fingers. Next up, Matt Smith's 11th Doctor breaks the fourth wall in the closing seconds of the series 6 finale The Wedding of River Song, which gives us 2 River Song episodes back to back here. Just saying. We then see Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor in the Series 9 episode Before the Flood, who has just been told by Clara that he's died and turned into a ghost, so that's cheerful. Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor then chats with her fam at the end of her second episode, The Ghost Monument, before we see a shot of Jo Martin as the fugitive Doctor from the 2020 episode Fugitive of the Judoon, which, as mentioned earlier, is quite interesting. If these clips were in timeline order, then you'd expect Jo Martin to appear first, or if they were in show order, you'd expect John Hurt to appear after Matt Smith. Perhaps they just didn't want to cause any controversy by putting Jo Martin before William Hartnell. Perhaps Russell has other ideas about where Jo Martin fits in the timeline. Or perhaps we're reading too much into the order of these clips. Probably that one. And lastly, we see David Tennant again as the 14th Doctor in his very first scene at the end of The Power of the Doctor. And now it's time for the bonus round, which is basically just some extra things that we noticed that don't necessarily qualify as proper Easter eggs, but we wanted to talk about anyway. So first of all, this episode has major WandaVision vibes, and Russell T Davies actually discussed WandaVision in Doctor Who magazine issue 605, so it was probably on his mind while writing this story. This one's a little bit sad and a little bit funny at the same time, but it seems that in every single timeline, Carla abandons Ruby in some form. Poor Ruby. The drone guards in this episode are the same ones we saw in the Interstellar Song Contest, so it seems that the Rani thought, I like you guys, you can come with me on my mission. We also see these clone-type classiforms, and they're credited as Seekers. Now, to me, they look very Borg-like, and we know Russell T Davies is a fan of Star Trek, so I wouldn't be surprised if he made that decision when thinking about what these creatures would look like. They also reminded me of the controller in Bad Wolf. I think it's the repetitiveness of the numbers really made me think of that character. Now, interestingly, this is one of the only stories in the show's history where the TARDIS doesn't appear. This hasn't happened since Ascension of the Cybermen in 2020. And also something very funny, the Vlinx, who you'd usually see sat in Unit HQ, is so useless that they've just put him in a box in this episode. I mean, we all know I'm not the biggest fan of the Vlinx, I think it's a little bit ridiculous, but I did think it was quite funny that in this reality, he had no purpose whatsoever and was just boxed up in the corner. And there you go, folks, that's all the details we noticed in Wish World. If you haven't already, then please do go back and check out our Ups and Downs review for this episode, our spoiler discussion for this episode. We do have an extra video all about Omega in this week's coverage as well. I know some people were a bit confused about who that was, so we've got you covered. And we've got to have loads coming for the Reality War too. Folks, this is the last week of season 2. We have got big plans. It's very exciting. In the meantime, though, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.